special Tuesday to the podcast world out there. Gentlemen, how's it going?
Awesome.
I've been better.
Been better. It's Tuesday instead of a Wednesday for us recording. Zeb's in a different location. We're in the same state. Ross is still, in Japan.
Still
but,
me.
In spirit, he's closer because it is almost Thanksgiving.
Right.
Thank God for Thanksgiving or something.
Yeah. And to everyone,
Yeah.
whether you're listening to this live, special shout out to Birdfinger, or if you're going to listen to this on SoundCloud or on YouTube, check us out at hawkscast.com. We're on Twitter at Seahawks Podcast and Seahawks Forum. But gentlemen, we got to talk. I know that I have to fess up that I got a lot of things wrong about that game. I had a lot of things that I was questioning. What are these Seahawks? What's this defense? Are we going to see this MVP year continue? I got a lot of things wrong. So first off, credit to the Seahawks for setting a franchise record for starting their year 6-0 on the road. So little golf clap for them. So I have to own up to that. I was mistaken, and I thoroughly enjoyed being wrong in that game. But initial thoughts on that no longer Sunday Night Football, but just Seahawk football at a 10 a.m. East Coast time.
I mean, it was sloppy, but they got the W, so you can't really be too mad about it, right?
Anytime you go to the East Coast, you play at 10 o'clock for your own body clock, and you come out with a win. If you're arguing about it, then you're not being realistic. You got the win. We got the win.
I was really surprised at how much I thought weather played a role in that game, because I think that influenced a lot of the kicking decisions, not necessarily passes. So Carson Wentz sailed a pass, Russell Wilson sailed a pass. Carson Wentz actually sailed a couple of passes.
Yeah, he did.
But the wind, I think, really impacted what both Doug Peterson and Pete Carroll were trying to do in regards to that kicking game. So I do want to give a shout out to Michael Dixon, who had a bad shank, but after that he looked like vintage rookie Dixon from last year.
Yeah.
If you
I mean, yeah, we're putting a little asterisk on there because that shank was really bad.
There was a lot of sloppy football played this weekend. If you watched other games around the league, it was just a weird weekend. Balls were sailing. Good teams were getting mollywopped. I don't think it wasn't a regular football weekend, I don't think.
There was definitely something in the sauce this week because one, the Niners continued their strong season and they just destroyed the Packers. The Saints looked like they were going to just like stomp the Panthers, but the Panthers just came roaring back and actually tied that game. And it required a missed field goal by the Panthers, and for the Saints to come in and kick a field goal to win it all at the end. What other crazy games were there? There are a bunch of blowouts that I didn't expect. That's for sure. I think the Jaguars scored like 100 points. Ryan Tannehill scored a bunch of touchdowns. I don't know where that came from for the Titans. There's definitely a weird game going on.
Yeah, lots of weird weather too. Rain and wind.
Yeah, it's that time of season where like all of a sudden like the sky opens up and weird stuff falls out and you just never know what you're going to get.
Yep.
And I don't know about you guys, because I know you maybe don't spend the time like I do, but I actually like going in and seeing what everyone's saying about games, especially when the Seahawks win, seeing what they have to say about Seattle, seeing what they have to say about the opponent. And everything that I saw was talking about Carson Wentz was not worth the investment. He's not the kind of player that can elevate a bad team. He needs tools around him. The Eagles are still viable to win that division because their schedule is so weak compared to other teams. They still might be a playoff team, even though they might win at 9-7. The Cowboys look terrible, but no one really wanted to talk about Seattle being able to like basically shut down, a bad offense. I mean, doesn't seem like the defense is getting credit, and that's something I know I was really harping on last week, thinking that I don't know if I can believe in this defense, and you find out that Jadeveon Clowney's not even going to start the game. I was really concerned about that.
I wasn't super excited about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean the when you heard Clowney was out, I didn't really get some of the negativity and the nervousness that I felt some people were giving off. But then, like at 1:00 in the morning or something, Tokyo time, I hear Clowney's not playing, and I hadn't even really thought of that as a real possibility. That made me a little nervous, I admit, because I really thought like, okay, there's no pass rush, because the week before he only had 1 sack, but he essentially created 2 of the other sacks as well. And I'm like, there's nobody that's going to replace that. I didn't think realistically.
I think the other thing you think about, and we'll talk about, because we are going to talk about the defense a little bit later on, but I did not expect Shaquem Griffin to get as many snaps as he did and to make such an impact in that game. And Ziggy Ansah had a really great showing as well. I don't know if that was the addition or the style of play that maybe playing with Griffin provides, but he had a great game as well. I'm not saying that he like created all of his opportunities, but when given, maybe because Carson Wentz just is not letting the ball fly in the bad weather and worried about the ball sailing, because he did turn the ball over quite a bit. But he was right there making plays along with Shaquem. So credit those two guys who we have not seen a lot of out of this year. They made the most out of it in that game, and I was thoroughly surprised and very happy to see that.
Yeah, the most impactful that either of them have been in a Seahawks uniform, I think.
Yeah, by far.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to keep you waiting. We're going to get going, but the Seahawks continue their road record by pushing themselves to 6-0 for the first time in team history. Seattle returns home to host the Vikings on Monday Night Football, who are also fighting for a wild-card spot, if not the division. Russell is continuing his great season, but may ultimately lose the MVP if that's your sort of thing. This is the Hawkscast podcast, brought to you by the Hawkscast Forum on a special Tuesday broadcast for Thanksgiving. And, guys, before we kind of get into topics, I do want to ask, if you were to decorate a Thanksgiving feast for the players, what Seahawk theme would you add? Would it be a signature dish on the turkey? Would it be like coloring the string beans so they're Seahawks green? Would it be putting a decoration in your marshmallow yams? What's your one Thanksgiving Seahawks twist that you would add if you were going to cater for some Seahawks?
I don't know. I've never thought about that.
All right, that's cool. I was just stalling time. I got topic number 1. So, Zeb, I'm going to hit you up with topic number 1. I want to know, are opposing teams afraid of this 2019 Seahawks team?
I don't think so. I'm not like they were in 2013. This shift in defensive attitude may change things going forward, but I think other than kind of the typical having to prepare to play Russ, I don't believe that that this is a team that is striking fear in their opponents at this point. I love the idea. That would be awesome. I'd love to get there again, but I don't think that's where we're at right now.
Ross, what about you? Is if you were an opposing defense, you're a head coach, I don't know who's the coach for the Vikings? Ziggy something? Zimmer? What's his name?
Mike Tice.
If you're former head coach Mike Tice, former tight end of the Seattle Seahawks, are you afraid of the 2019 Seahawks?
Mike Zimmer is you know what? I think that as fans and following the perception and things like that, I don't think that you'd get that idea that we're a team that inspires a lot of fear. But I don't think professionals get like necessarily afraid. Although I do think there are some weeks where like general managers and coaches get together and go, you know what, like we're just hoping for the best. They know they don't really have a shot when they line up the talent. But I don't think I necessarily afraid. I do think the professionals who actually, do this for a living, when they're looking at it, I don't think they're necessarily afraid, but I do think that there's a lot of headaches and a lot of trepidation for them. I do think so. Even though we're winning most games by 1 or 2 points, I do think they look and like they go, okay, what? We could stop Carson, but if we have our defensive alignment up to stop a run based on Carson, maybe they switch over to Penny and he actually gets the yards. We could try to stop Lockett, but do we really want to leave Metcalf out there? And oh, by the way, all of a sudden there's Hall of Fame talent, if not career Gordon out there now, right? And by the way, they've made a lot of hay out of that third string or who used to be a practice squad, tight end. I think there's a lot that, again, like not fear, but I think that we're a very, very frustrating team to have to face right now. And I think also right in the back of the mind is the last 2 weeks, all of a sudden, with Diggs in there and some other talent, other players getting some extra playing time and some progress that people have made inside the scheme, all of a sudden the defense looks a lot more legit too. So, again, I get our reputation now is not fear-inspiring compared to 2013 maybe, but I do think that maybe – there's a lot of Tums and antacids being passed around in the Vikings building this week. Yeah, I do.
And I guess the question is maybe like you were saying, it's not so much that teams are afraid, but are teams going to be up at night trying to scheme? Russell Wilson creates a unique experience where he is having an MVP-like year. He's doing really well. He's ridiculously efficient in a lot of regards. And he's not doing it with household names. And maybe for him, that's always going to be tricky. Like, how do you contain him? How do you escape a guy that doesn't know how to go down, that knows how to keep a ball alive and is looking downfield and can make a big play? But then at the same time, maybe you're not so concerned about the defense because they've got a couple names, but maybe you think you can neutralize them because, if they've got a pass rush, we're just going to do a 3-step drop. We're just going to throw screens. We're going to throw slants. We're going to throw all these quick routes that doesn't matter how fast your defense or your blitz gets there, the ball's out before they get a chance. And we have seen some teams be successful with that. I think the thing that is interesting about this 2019 team is that they're just not consistent. There's not one facet outside of Russell Wilson where you're going to say, oh yes, you're going to get this every single time from this player. You're going to get this great matchup, you're going to get this great advantage, you're going to get this great depth, you're going to get this great, mind process and like how this player attacks the ball or does all these things. I don't think you're really seeing that. And maybe from that scheme, you're not worried about all of these players that you have to keep an eye on. You can just kind of minimize, say, like, this is the one thing we do to neutralize this, or this is the one thing we do to try and take that player away from that skill set. I think that consistency, I think, is the one thing that maybe teams are having a hard time trying to know, like, what are they going to get? Because I didn't expect that offensive or defensive performance that we saw on the field. I mean, I definitely did not seeing Rashad Penny run for 100 and some odd yards and getting a touchdown on a huge play on 1st and 20. Like, I had to go back and actually, like, reevaluate and say, like, wow, he had that giant run on 1st and 20, well past the midfield point, on their own side of the field. I will be interested to see what happens at the end because I think a lot that can happen in these next 5 games will change what is the perception of this team because they currently sit at 9-2. Do you think that's something that will happen? At the end of the year, a lot of people will not necessarily think about the first 11 games, but how they finish maybe the last 5?
I think, people are somewhat not always concerned with the road you took to get somewhere. They're just concerned with what your number is at the end. And so that's what I think already now. Like, people, the casual fan especially, is not going to really be thinking about how we got there. It's 2 things. It's what's your overall record and then what do they remember? So on our plus side, people are saying like, wow, Seattle's 9-2. But we don't come across as dominating because they don't remember a lot of dominating games up there. And, and people are a bit more knowledgeable than they used to just because of fantasy football. At least they know like the names, right? So yeah, we don't have the general perception as the super dominating team because of how we've won. But that number, as the left side number gets bigger and bigger and the right side doesn't, you can't just ignore it. I mean, even me, like even us, the three of us, all season long, we've just been like, are they actually good? Are they actually good? But the fact is, every time they go out there, practically they've come away with the win. So there's something to it, right?
I want to
Yeah.
I want to ask a final question before we kind of move on, and this is a shout out to Austin Slater on Twitter. Check him out. And he had a comment, and a lot of it had to do with the idea that people are kind of sarcastic, saying like, "Oh, Pete's 9-2. We should fire him because he punts on 4th and 1." And Austin, I don't have the tweet in front of me, but he essentially said that it can be both. You can praise him for being 9-2, and you can also be upset with him for not correctly looking at the stats on what you should do on 4th and 1. And it was a little open ended because it wasn't saying like, oh, well, you're at this yard line, so you should make a play to try and convert that 4th down, or you should try and kick a field goal. But I want to kind of take this idea of, in this moment, Pete Carroll has his Seahawks at 9-2, a game behind the division-leading San Francisco 49ers. And we talk about the schemes and our team's afraid of the Seahawks team. Is that a flaw in thinking about how good this team really is? When you could say like, well, look at the record, but look at how they got there, and not having the confidence of the record standing up to how they got there. Is that a problem? Ross, I don't know if you saw that on Twitter, but what do you think about that concept?
I mean, every week another team out there makes an unorthodox decision, and it kind of sets people off. And this week it was the Ravens going for it on 4th and 4 when they were up by 29. And so that's progressive football, and that's da-da-da. And it's true. Like, I mean, I've said for 15 years or something that statistically, yeah, teams should actually go for it more on 4th down than they do. They should also go for 2-point conversions more often than they do. And like, there's a tiny bit. I mean, everybody wants to have like that coach, and everybody wishes the game were a little bit more like. And like, there's two things to it, though, in my opinion. One is Pete Carroll is not a conservative coach, and people. I mean, I even saw Austin. Since we're talking a little bit about Austin, we're picking on him a little bit, I guess. He actually said that also he believes, just like that Garrett in Dallas, that Pete Carroll just trusts his gut too much and everything. And I don't think so at all. I think Pete Carroll's studied the game, and the Seahawks were the first football team, pro football team, to have an analytics department. It's just that his analytics and what he cares about is different. He analyzes the game completely different. He's got to boil down to 10 things he thinks that matter, and all the rest is essentially white noise. So yeah, he's gonna punt on 4th down because that doesn't matter to him. Right. Not in how he thinks he's gonna win. And yeah, like, no system's flaw is perfect. There will be flaws, and maybe eventually we will win a game, or lose a game because of it. But you know what? If you do everything the other way, you lose games. Again, at the end of the day, you can't just take pure statistical analysis in football, because these aren't dice you're rolling. It's not all players are cookie cutters, not all schemes are cookie cutters. It's not baseball, it's a series of one-on-one contests. Everything affects everything else. And if you've built your team to function one way, then it doesn't matter if statistically a different way it works. But if you're not built that way, you can't do it that way. And the opposite is true. So, and the other thing is also, like, when it's your job, when you're playing Madden and you do something statistically, sound, but it looks weird and you fail, it doesn't matter. But when it's your job and you have to actually justify it to other people, and you've done something like that looks unorthodox, even though the number's on your side, the fact is, if something looks unorthodox and you fail at it, it actually doesn't matter more, because people will come down on you more.
I would trust Carroll to make those decisions every single time over anybody who's just basing it on statistics that they've read or counted or whatever. Pete Carroll's the head coach for a reason. You don't win or lose a game based on any one particular decision. It's a series of decisions and a lot of execution that goes into winning and losing games. I'll trust Pete to make that decision every single time.
I mean, like, and coaches aren't infallible. Like, they have errors, they make mistakes. I don't think he's infallible, but I think what's particularly interesting about Pete Carroll is that some of the flaws are inherently tied up in the positives. It's not just they have some coaches just have like a pure blind spot, like on timekeeping or on offensive play calling. But in his case, it's interesting because you almost yeah, the weak spots are integral to the positives. He has to be that loyal because he's all about positivity and competition. So it would undercut everything if he's being that positive. But every single time a coach is messed up, even a whole season, he immediately gets fired because he's about second chances. He's about getting better, and he's about I know inside you there's better football. I know inside you there's better coaching. So he has to be a little bit more loyal. Um, that's just part of who he is. And you're going to take all the positive results that come with that, but they'll occasionally, maybe he's loyal to a fault sometimes. Eventually he'll get it when he realizes, no, there is no better football inside you, or there is no better coaching inside you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will give people the second and third choices. And most of the time that works.
I want to close on what I posted on Twitter in regards to Austin, and it's more of the fact that you have the right to critique the coach and the decisions that he's made in the moment, in a game. Journalists always comment, sports journalists always comment how there is so much going on during the game, you don't have enough bandwidth to take it all in. And you'd like to think that a coach is able to be a machine and get like someone in his ear saying like, hey, you need to do these things because the numbers say you should do this. Like you'd love to have that opportunity, but that's just not realistic on a 40-second play clock. When you need to make a decision in the first few seconds, otherwise you're going to run into delay a game and just put yourself even further behind. So I think that's the reality that we don't have a good grasp of or acknowledge as fans, because the broadcast doesn't do that. The broadcast doesn't show the head coach frantically running around as soon as the next play clock starts over and seeing what they're trying to do. We just see, oh, the TV cut away for 20 seconds and the play clock's down to 15 and the quarterback doesn't have play. What the hell are they doing? It's not as simple as I think we maybe want it to be, and that's maybe our fault because we're not actually presented with the reality. We're presented with a very presentable TV package. And to that extent, because of that, we have a very skewed idea of what actually is going on, and we make kind of dumb decisions on their behalf because we think we know better, because we play a video game, or we can make a decision without that kind of pressure in our work life. So that's my final thought. But I do want to move on, and I want to ask about topic number 2. And Ross, I want to know, has the addition of safety Quandre Diggs been the cure that Pete has been looking for all year?
Mostly. I mean, I don't think it's ever one guy and it's ever one thing. But when we had Earl Thomas, and people used to talk about how, although you can't always see it, Earl Thomas is the most important guy out there. He's what lets the defense run how it should. He's the person that puts it all together. And I think we're seeing a lot of that again. We touched a bit on it last week, but there's just so many effects having the right guy back that matters. Whether it's his big hitting that sort of like pumps other people up to make those big hits as well, to the big play capability, which you just can't replace and you can't coach that. And even just like the instinct for the coverages, and that, I mean, even Bradley McDougall's already talked about that, how once there's the right free safety back there, he can do his job better. And the corners can do their job better. And the corner, it's just a cascading effect. In Pete Carroll's defense, once you have the right free safety, everything flows from that. And then once the coverages even are better, and the quarterbacks have to hold the ball for another quarter to half a second, then the sacks come, and the pressures come, and then the sack strips come. Then the interceptions, they're throwing under pressure just a bit more, and the coverages are a bit better. And he's positioning himself, his first interception, like you could say he didn't, that interception last week. He didn't he didn't have to make some amazing play. He didn't jump on it. He didn't make one of those, T2 had 2 amazing interceptions where he dove for them. Diggs didn't have to do that, but What he did do was position himself properly for it in case there was an overthrow. He had coverage right, but he also had coverage for overthrow. And when the ball was overthrown, he was right there. I can safely say, judging where T2 usually plays himself, T2 would have been closer to the guy. And so the overthrow would have been overthrow both of them. So, man, we've talked about it for years, and now and I don't think, each one of us even has said it at one point, hey, Earl Thompson makes this defense, whatever. But sometimes it felt almost like we're kind of talking out our asses, right? We're repeating it because we've heard other people say it, but we don't get it. And now we're sort of getting a hands-on experience. You take out T2, you just change who the free safety is, and now it looks a lot more like what we're used to, what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah, really quickly, that one year where Earl Thomas got injured, not his last year, but I think the year before, it was like the last final 5-6 games. The Seahawks did not have an interception in those final games. And if they had won one more game, so it was 3 years ago, it should be, they would have been like the 2 seed, and they would have had a bye in the first round, which could have totally changed where they ended up finishing. And that was the 10-5-1 season, I believe.
Yeah. So there's the concrete observed evidence that Pete Carroll needs the right free safety is just mounting, right? And it makes more sense. Now you look back in this last draft, he took 3 safeties, and the year before he took 2 safeties. He's been trying to prepare for this, and I think it's just been super frustrating for them that they couldn't get the right guy back there. They gave everybody a shot.
To be
fair,
he did turn one of those safeties into a starting corner. But Zeb, I want to.
I wasn't counting.
but Zeb,
I was talking to Delano Hill and T2 and
yeah. But Zeb, I want to ask you. There is no replacing Earl Thomas, but is Quandre Diggs something that Pete Carroll can kind of leverage? He's already talked about he's showing clips of Quandre Diggs play in the game, his pursuit, his speed to attack the ball. Is that something that Pete Carroll has been missing in his defense so far this year?
Yeah, it seems like he's definitely been the right guy to show up at the position. And obviously everything Ross said, to echo all that, it just cascades from there. Just him being there and playing at the level that he is kind of makes everybody around him's job a little bit easier. And where I think it's still a fairly small sample size, but I think the difference between the defense before he started playing and afterwards is pretty glaring. So it's hard not to assume that his presence is a very big part of that.
Is it concerning that has been such a big gap for Seattle since Earl Thomas got injured early last year in Phoenix?
Go
ahead.
It's no secret that this team hasn't drafted particularly well over the years, and like Ross said again, they've been throwing just about everything they could at it, hoping that one of these guys that they draft would be the one. And it just hasn't really worked. So for them to make the move they did to go out and get him, I think it just came time. They were like, look, none of these guys are the guy for the job right now. We've tried. Let's go get a guy that we know can do what we need.
Yeah. I'm with you guys. I think on one hand, the sample size is really small. And I know last week I was really saying, I don't believe in this defense yet. But we've talked about the value of Earl Thomas. We talked about the value of losing him in spite of the fact of his age and concerns about injury, especially in the manner in which he plays. But if this is what Quandre can bring, he can help Bradley McDougall feel more confident. If he can help his corners be more confident that they're going to have help over top when needed, if that means that Bobby can play closer to the line of scrimmage. The thing that's crazy about this game defensively, every part of that defense played extremely well. The defense was getting pressure. Shaquem Griffin, Ziggy Ansah, Quentin Jefferson, Rasheem Green, they had a monster game. Poona Ford had a monster game of that D-line. Michael Kendricks, KJ Wright, Bobby Wagner all had 10 tackles plus each. 2 interceptions in the secondary. Shaquille was there. Shaquille was there helping with the strip. They were all over the place, and it was like every facet of that defense. And the biggest addition we've seen has only been in that secondary. We've seen what Jadeveon Clowney can do with that team, but we didn't really see Quandre like make a big splash in that Niners game. Now we see kind of that addition, other that maybe he has had impact, and I'm really excited to see what that will do going from a Niners receiving core without Emmanuel Sanders and without George Kittle to a receiving core that Carson Wentz pretty much had to paste together with glue and Zach Ertz. And now we're going to see Kirk Cousins bring Stephon Diggs and Kyle Rudolph and Dalvin Cook. Potentially Adam Thielen's going to be there, but it looks like he's still going to be out. It's still kind of early. We don't know what the full injury report is. But it will be interesting to see how the Seattle defense on Monday night lines up against with kind of a potent offense, and seeing if the addition of Quandre Diggs and hopefully the health of Jadeveon Clowney, we get to see what this defense is, and if it's as good as it has been the past 2 weeks. I mean, who knows what the limit is? If we could see a complete, defensive like rehaul midway through the year, it would be pretty crazy to see.
Agree.
Yeah. Vikings are going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Final thoughts on Quandre Diggs?
He's the man.
Glad they found the guy for that spot, man. It helps a lot.
I mean, what did we give up for him? A fourth rounder?
I want to say
a third rounder, maybe.
It wasn't a lot.
It wasn't a fourth rounder. It wasn't a second rounder because we gave up a third rounder for Jadeveon. I think it might have been a fourth rounder.
It definitely wasn't. It was let's see right here.
Fifth round pick.
A fifth round pick. Wow.
But we also got a seventh rounder.
Right.
In 2021.
Wow.
That's just like so petty. Like, and we get a seventh rounder a couple years from now. Like,
and he's not a free agent for another year and a half, I believe. So,
right.
Yeah. All right. Maybe even longer. Let's move on to topic number 3. This is the Hawks Cast Corner. We're going to talk a little bit about Seahawks Twitter. So, during that game, lots of things to complain about, lots of things to be concerned about. But the biggest thing, Zeb, is, are the fumbles going to doom the Seahawks?
I hope not. I don't like the fumbles very much, but so far we've for the most part been able to contain the damage. I don't know. I know I've seen people get down on Carson quite a bit throughout the year for the fumbles. Everything kind of feels a little fluky to me, and I don't know. It's hard to say for sure, but the one in particular, the one where him and Russell were not on the same page, likely Russell was on the correct page and Carson wasn't, and that was pretty ugly. But I don't know. Hopefully, we had a pretty good chunk in between there where fumbles didn't seem to be an issue. So hopefully we can get back to that part of it and keep it from being an issue going forward and into the postseason, especially. You're not going to win in the playoffs fumbling the ball like that. So
you could win in the playoffs throwing 4 interceptions, but you can't win with 4 fumbles.
Yeah. You can definitely throw as many picks as you want. That's easy.
But
obviously, I'm kidding.
That's the Andrew Luck style.
Yeah. Zeb, I want to ask you one final question here is, have you ever seen Russell Wilson kind of throw his hands up and say, dude, like, what the hell? Have you ever seen him do that in a game?
I mean, maybe a handful of times, once or twice. It's very, very rare. But I think it's good also in this, like to see him. A good leader isn't always just positive, right? Sometimes a good leader has to chew your ass out and make sure you understand that you got to do better next. So it was almost kind of cool to see it.
Ross, are the fumbles going to doom us?
Dude, you can easily see if they don't get in see them lose a game over because it was like it's so funny because I try to be so objective sometimes and rational, and certain things aren't connected. But man, does it seem like the fumbles are contagious, doesn't it? But that makes no sense. It's not a disease. There's no reason it should be like that. But man, it wasn't even just Chris Carson. I didn't mind his like the second one is technically hit. Well, they count on Russ. It counts in our minds against Chris Carson, but I'm not worried about that one because that's not a bulk security stuff. But man, like everybody's fumbling. Stop, because it will cost us a game much more than punting from fourth down at some point. Fumbles will cost us a game eventually. It's going to be like a possession that we really need something to happen, and somebody's going to. So they got to get it under control.
We kind of have seen that already in the Baltimore game. It's a one-score game.
Yeah.
There's a throw to the flats to DK. He tries to make a football move, and in the transition, he just puts the ball on the ground, and a guy, takes the other way for a touchdown, and all of a sudden it's a 2-score game in the fourth quarter, and the game's kind of decided. So, I mean,
yeah,
we have kind of seen it, and I think the concern is because it's kind of all random. It's not the same thing again and again. With Carson, he has had 2 fumbles where he's just running the wrong play. He's not where he needs to be. It gets credited to Russ, but those are concerns, and I think we saw that, Rashad Penny was getting a little bit more touch because he did have, I think it was 14 attempts to 12 on Carson. And Birdfeed is even asking, should Penny take some reps from Carson because of the fumble? I am hesitant to say yes right now because of their style of play is so different, and because Chris Carson is a remarkably better pass blocker. I think that's kind of what Russell needs right now. But the thing with the fumbles is it's people seem to be making, like, they're trying to do too much, like DK Metcalf trying to do too much, moving the ball around, trying to get a big play. In that Niners game, he takes he could have easily just gone out of bounds, but he fights for 15 more yards. But in that 16th yard, he gets stripped. So I think there's that element that, like, you always want people to be aggressive, but never to the point that they're going to lose the ball, because that's what everyone says, like, oh, be aggressive, like, fight for more yards. But then the bad thing happens, and you're like, oh, well, he should have gone down and taken a knee then. It's this revisionist history that people try to have, as opposed to, like, this is what should be happening before it even comes into play. But I am concerned. I think, along with the inconsistency of the Seahawks never playing a complete game, this is the one thing that I'm really, really unsure of what it's going to happen and how it's going to play out in these last 5 games and hopefully the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean,
in
the last game didn't. Good.
To Carson and Penny, I'm glad it was good to see them kind of go with the hot hand there. I think that paid off, and was, I think a lot of us have been a little down on Penny, and probably rightfully so. He hasn't looked like the player that we hoped he was, but it was really good to see him get going this weekend and put up some big yards. We haven't had a long touchdown run like that in a while, not that I can remember, at least. I think Carson is our starter, and he's the guy. He has that kind of tough mentality and playing style. But if the opportunity arises for Penny to get in there and he's looking good, stick with him. I like the way they did that this week.
I like to see that there's a lot more balance to it, for sure.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll kind of hinted, didn't he? I mean, he said, he gave Chris Carson a vote of confidence again, but he also said, competition's a beautiful thing. So I think that's an indication that Carson's not in the doghouse yet, but he's well on his way. And competition's a good thing. If even though Chris Carson perhaps fits our style better, there was a reason they drafted Penny in the first round. They think he can do it, right? And he's showing he can do it now. So Chris Carson better 3 points of contact. 3 points of contact. like doing the physics. If you've got the 3 points of contact, it's almost impossible to lose the ball. 3 points of contact.
There has to be a carry coach out there, someone that teaches people how to carry a football.
I'm surprised actually with all the money spent at football. I'm surprised there's like seems to be a market for a few things like that. I feel like there should be like an academy out there that like borderline players they don't sign to anybody's player squad. They just go to these academies and just work on because every talks like there's no offensive line development in college anymore. There should be like past or offensive linemen like academies and like you said like specific coaches that just teach like ball security and get paid bucks to do that, right?
My guess is in the developmental stages when they say, "Oh, you can't catch, you got to play defense. Oh, you can't run securely, you got to play defense." Like I think that's what happens a lot is because players play both ways, and then say, "You know what? We think you're marginally better on this side, so we're going to move you over here because we can't trust you to do X, Y, and Z." I think that's like maybe the common thing that happens developmentally.
So much money in football that just seems like people should be willing to gamble a little bit more, making people more productive outside of that. I mean, even like DK Metcalf, you want to tell this is going to sound ridiculous. You want to tell me like DK Metcalf couldn't be like a speed rusher?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he has that side speed thing, but he can't turn. You know, he can't pivot. That 3-cone drill.
I want him up the middle, not like it's not going to bend obviously because.
I have a great counter for you, Ross. The reason why coaches cannot teach certain players to do this, and again, we're talking about an extreme here, is because some players are just wired in a way that you can't coach them. It doesn't matter what you tell them, doesn't matter what you want them to do in a specific role, they will defy it. Perfect example. Do you remember Earl Thomas trying to return a punt, and he refused to fair catch? Dude, refused. Like, obviously, that's a coaching decision. You shouldn't put him in that position, but that's what coaches sometimes have to face. Because in practice, oh yeah, coach, I'll fair catch. Don't worry, I'll fair catch. No. In the real game, I got this. I'm going to take this to the house.
I get it. I know what you're saying, and there's certain truth to that. I mean, do you ever watch that classic Tom Cruise movie, Days of Thunder? No, it's classic. They talk like the owner of the sports car, the race car team is talking is saying like you can't teach somebody to be a race car driver. They either are or they aren't. And like he's talking about his hunting dog. He's like, that's my best hunting dog. I've never taught him a damn thing. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, like, there is some to it, but if you have the right teaching philosophy, I think you can. And as far as the Thomas thing goes, you're never going to get me to agree because I disagreed with you and Pete Carroll. I was completely willing to give Earl like one more game where like one more try at it. Because man, it was.
No,
yeah, I know.
After that second punt, man, I mean, he pretty much had like the defender like giving him a hug right as he caught the ball. I mean,
right, but I'm just saying, like maybe that's because everybody learns a different way. So people have to do it, right? Yeah. Earl Thomas potentially would have learned from that second thing and gone on to be one of the most exciting punt returners of all time, rivaling Deion Sanders.
And I think that's the thing. Coaches will fall in love. Like, well, if he could just if he knows when to run and if he knows when to fair catch, he could be amazing. But if you can't turn that switch off on him, then you can't trust him to do it. So I do want to move on. I want to go to topic number 4. And Ross, I want to know. We're talking about the Minnesota Vikings. They're 8-3 in their division. Is this the year that Kirk Cousins beats a 500 team? An over 500 team, sorry.
I don't. Maybe. Yeah, because there's a lot of like 500 teams out there. That guy's perplexing. That if different style of coach killing, right? Because like everything seems right and the numbers seem right, but it just I don't know if he can win you the big game. I like that dude. I like the fact that he was drafted as the same draft as RG3 and like could have just whined his way out of Washington and didn't. Just goes to work, man. I people hate on him, and there's some hate there, but
all right. So here, real quick. That. I want to add this to the conversation. There's currently one team on the Vikings schedule through their year, so they still have other teams available. The only team that they have beat that has a 500 team or better record as of right now is the Dallas Cowboys, who are 6-5.
Do they already play with San Francisco?
They do not play San Francisco
No.
this year because it is one of the NFC
Oh, did they
alternates.
not play? Okay.
That's why they
So
played
who would
us, because they came in second and we came in second.
Right. Okay. Wow. I mean, wow. If not, they just got really like fortunate with the scheduling, didn't they?
Actually, no, I'm sorry. My apologies. The Raiders have a above 500 record, so Kirk Cousins has one,
Okay.
but he also
So
has.
I mean, like maybe he's got over that. I mean, but I don't think it. But I mean, he's not doing it this year, right? It's sort of like they're running the ball a lot. We think we run the ball a lot, but they have like their number one rusher has 200 yards rushing, well, 150 yards more rushing than Carson, and their backup has probably 120 yards more than our backup. I mean, they run. So they're doing it, but it's sort of like it's not about Kirk Cousins, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be.
The Raiders are also 6-5, so it's not like we're saying like they're beating world beaters here. But
I think we're a challenge for them.
Zeb, what's your take on Kirk Cousins? What is if you're a Vikings fan, are you excited that he's your quarterback?
He's having a pretty good year. Like, to me, it's a bit like it's a little bit like having Matt Hasselbeck. And no disrespect to Hass, he's one of my favorite all-time Seahawks. But I don't think that for the most part, especially people that the big football fans were ever like, thank God we have Matt Hasselbeck. You know what I mean? Like, he's good. He's good enough. He can get the job done.
Is he a David Craig? Is David Craig?
Yeah, I mean, probably similar. I mean, I think Hasselbeck ultimately was probably a better quarterback than Dave Craig, and maybe better than Kirk Cousins. But it's you probably wouldn't be mad at an upgrade in that particular situation. So, but I think he's good, and I think he's putting up decent numbers this year. Only 3 picks is pretty impressive.
He's got like a 6-to-1 TD to interception ratio.
Yeah, he's not a bad quarterback by any means. And he's also the kind of guy that the pre-Quandre Diggs Seahawks might have had a lot of trouble with. But I think where we're at right now, I think we should be able to. You can only hope to contain him, right?
You can only hope to contain Cousins.
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah,
I'm not mad at the guy, but I don't think he's a step above being just a guy.
He's not a Hall of Fame candidate, obviously, but I don't know. He's actually one of the people my theory on team building, he's the kind of guy you can use. Like, I think that there's more than one way to build a Super Bowl team that we've talked about ad nauseum, and he's sort of the level I think you can get by with and still get to the Super Bowl.
Not with that contract, though. Not with that
contract.
But
that's the thing. You have to be smart about it. You can't give him what you gave him. If you're going to pay that much money, then you have to get the elite. But you can't give elite money to somebody who's really good, because then you put yourself in a hole. You're just like at a competitive disadvantage to everybody else. So the Vikings.
I'm looking at you, Rams.
Jeez, are they in trouble, man? We sent extra like just like non-Seahawks topics just to talk about, because how much fun is it to diss on the Rams right now?
We'll get our chance.
And I feel great
we'll get our chance.
And it's great because it's not even like hindsight. All 3 of us as well. Like last year, we're going like, okay, yeah, you're building up for this year and you're going to be pretty good. But man, like the world's not going to end in December 2019. You got to do something after that, and you're not ready.
Yeah.
So
I think the thing about Kirk Cousins is it's a couple of different things. One, it's the contract. If he were making like 60% of what he's being paid right now, you would be ecstatic, because you'd have another $40+ million to spend somewhere else, or re-sign someone, or secure someone in off season. But instead, you've got Kirk Cousins, who's not hurting you. He's not turning the ball over, but he's not winning the game for you. He does have, a good win when he was with Washington against Seattle in Seattle. I was there for most of that game. But for the most part, his record against teams that finish with a 500 record or better is abysmal. And a lot of it has to do with is he's not a quarterback that's going to win you a game. He will help maintain, and I think the fact that they have such a good running game with Dalvin Cook really helps them. But he's just not got it in him to really like go head to head with the big team. Russell Wilson is the only quarterback that has a winning record against teams that are plus 8 games over 500. That's an insane stat to think about. How many times are teams plus 8 over 500 at any point of the year? And Russell Wilson's beaten 6 of them. There's never been questions about Russ's ability to beat a good team. There are questions about maybe like, the team doesn't play to the level that they need to, or they're just not playing until like the end of the game. But that's never been a concern about can he beat the good teams, because he's just proven it beyond a reasonable doubt that he can. Kirk Cousins has this stigma, and it has pervasive throughout his history, and I think that is a concern. If I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, I'm really worried because you're guaranteeing him, I think another year, and they might make this a playoff run because of the last 5 games they have, only Seattle and Green Bay has a winning record. Chicago's 5-6, Chargers are down, Detroit's down, but Green Bay and Seattle are the only winning teams that they will face that will have a winning record at the end of the year. And they're currently tied with Green Bay, and because Green Bay has a tiebreaker over them, they're currently second in their division. They still might make the playoffs, but if I'm a Vikings fan, I am upset that he is my quarterback because of what he is not versus what that contract makes him what he should be. And I think that's really unfortunate because, there's nothing against him, but he's just not the guy that's going to lead you to anything because he hasn't been able to prove it yet.
Yeah.
And on a side note, I talked about this last time we played the Vikings last year. The guy does not know how to cook a steak. That's a problem. Final thoughts on the Vikings.
I think they're a pretty good team. I think they're probably going to finish better than Green Bay. I think that's their division to take now at this point. They've got some weapons. Cook's having a hell of a season. We all know what Thielen and
they have their own
Diggs.
dig. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
and even
are we going to see
Rudolph.
some digs on Diggs crime?
I hope so. That would be
Hopefully.
great. I mean, Green Bay does.
And their
also
defense
has
isn't
a
half bad
pretty
either.
kick schedule too.
They've got some guys that can rush the passer. They've got some guys that can get to the quarterback.
They have 2 guys with over 7 sacks.
Yeah, we don't.
No, we do not.
So,
Right.
Our leading sack artist is Clowney and Kendricks with 3. Yeah. But Clowney has 3 forced fumbles. So
I just want to throw this out there. Of the 5 remaining games for the Packers, who we would not face unless we play them in the playoffs, they play at New York, at home against Washington, home against Chicago, at Minnesota,
Which New York?
and at Detroit.
Which New York?
Giants. So they only
They
play
both got
one team with a
Giants.
winning record as of right now. That's the Packers. The Vikings have a tougher schedule because they go to at Seattle, home against Detroit, at LA Chargers, home against Green Bay, and home against Chicago. So both of these teams could easily pick up 3 more wins and get to 11-5. And still
Neither of them have a really tough schedule, to be
No,
honest.
not at all. I mean,
Chicago was supposed to be good this year, and they're not. The Chargers, Jesus,
we're supposed to be good this year, and they're not.
they're not. So yeah,
The Lions might. They're at
the
least
Lions may
kind
not
of
win a game.
Yeah.
Lions are 3-7-1 or something like that, and like they're sinking fast. They got rid of Caldwell to get like a Patriots disciple dude, and that dude's not working out.
Wah, wah.
They were 9-7 back-to-back years before they changed to this guy, Patricia.
Yeah.
Can't have a coach named Patricia, man.
But I think if anything, what it shows is Seattle is in a good position now. They obviously need to finish out. They need to have a continually strong end of the year to put them in the position. But let's go ahead and move on to our predictions.
Yeah.
So, Zeb, I want to kick it off with you, and I want to know what's the final score between the Vikings and the Seahawks?
I'm expecting a lot of offense out of us this week, and I'm going to say 34-17.
That's quite a score. Ross, what's your final score?
21-10.
Ooh.
I'm dialing things way back. I'm dialing things back. I'm always overestimating. I forget who I'm talking about. It's 21-10, maybe 18.
Okay. I'm going to go 24-21 Seattle. I think this is going to be a close game. I think that Seattle will be pretty comfortable in most of this game, but the Vikings make a late push, but it's not going to be enough because there's only a 60-minute game, not a 65-minute game. Who has an MVP like day? We're not worried about the MVP at the end of the year, just for the day. Which is more likely to have MVP day, Zeb? Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins?
Well, I think it's Russell Wilson, and I think it has to do with the fact that I think Russell does want to be the MVP at the end of the season. And I think if you saw what Lamar Jackson did last night on Monday Night Football, then you know what Russell Wilson has to do next week on Monday Night Football in order to keep up pace. So I have a feeling that Russell's going to have his kill goggles on come Monday.
Ooh, that would be sweet.
Yeah, I just invented the term kill goggles.
Ross, what's your take on the MVP day?
It's interesting to hear Zeb talk about Russell, that award. He's not going to get it. I don't think it's going to be close, but that conversation ended 2 weeks ago, maybe. But I mean, Wilson, he's capable of having MVP like days, right? He's individually, but maybe he's not in the right offense to win that. So, yeah. So good. Sorry, Russ, you're not going to win it overall. But for this game, maybe you run in a touchdown, you throw for 2 more. So there you go.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I'm with you guys. This is more of a statement for Russell, not necessarily a knock against Cousins, even though I'm not a big Cousins fan. But Russell Wilson on Monday night, I think is going to continue to do well. I think it's going to be a much better showing than what he showed in his past 2 games. So I don't know if it's going to be a monster Lamar Jackson kind of game, but I think it'll be something very comfortable. Zeb, who is more likely to throw their 4th interception of the year, Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson?
Kirk Cousins is going to throw his 4th and 5th.
Ooh.
Really? I'll go with that. I like that. That's my answer too.
I'm going to say it's a push. I'm going to say that both of these quarterbacks are not going to throw interceptions. I think Russell will have the better overall day, but I think no interceptions will be thrown, so it will have to be saved for another game, and hopefully Russell doesn't throw any more for the rest of the year. Zeb, who's going to get more touches? Is it going to be Carson or is it going to be Penny?
Carson.
Ross, are you on the Carson train?
I'm going to say Penny.
I'm kind of with Ross. I want Penny to get more touches because I think he provides a little bit more dynamic in the fact that he does have more burst. What I would like to see is he get more touches on like passes on the outside or maybe like a toss because he was really effective against that Philadelphia defense. Dalvin Cook and Chris Carson are almost identical in rushing production. The difference is Dalvin Cook has just a ton more rushing touchdowns. Who is going to have the better rushing day to overall, the Minnesota Vikings or the Seattle Seahawks?
Seahawks.
The Vikings really want to run, but I think Seattle now can close down a running game when they want. So I think they're going to dare Cousins to beat him. May even come back to bite him for one play. But I think
Al Woods ain't having none of it.
Yeah, Al Woods has been having a very, very solid year. I'm with you. I think Seattle wants to control that game and they're going to run it. Minnesota will want to do the same thing, but I don't think they're going to see a lot of success on the ground. I think the defense will play really well. And what is more likely going to be the reason for this offensive win? Is it going to be because of the passing game or because of the rushing game, Zeb?
I'm going to say passing just because I think Russ is going to throw 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Ooh. Ross?
Well, I think you pass the score, but you run to win, right? Both.
Both? You're gonna say it's
Yep.
equally valuable? I can get behind
I
that.
just I don't like. I mean, like I said, like I don't really. In my opinion, especially with the Seahawks style of play, you can't really separate the two.
Yeah. I'm going to say rushing is going to be a bigger impact of this game. I could see Russ like squeaking out, getting maybe like 60 yards on the ground. I think the rushing game is going to be really important. I think Carson and Penny both need to be playing well, and I think that's what's going to help Seattle.
Like I really, really strongly agree with that it's mostly going to be like, but I think there's going to be a limit to how far that'll take you. I think like they're going to run and run and run and run, and then just occasionally take the shot, and it's the shot, and it's going to be sort of the combination that does it for them.
Okay, I can
You
believe
just
that.
run and run and run and run and run and run. They're creeping in that box, they're creeping in the box, and now is the time to take that shot to Metcalf and give him a chance at redemption.
Speaking of Metcalf, a little bit of a downer. Over under Zeb, 1.5 drops for Mr. DK Metcalf.
Oh, I'm gonna go for under. I'm hoping he is able to bounce back a bit.
This is hard. I felt so bad for Muskin because he had a couple drops, and like they kept going to him, and people were frustrated, like, "Oh, he's locked in." I don't think he was locked in. I think Russell Wilson was doing that thing where he does, like, "You've had the drop, so I'm going to focus on you to build your call. I'm going to build you back up. I'm going to purposely target you. You're going to catch us once you feel better." But then you drop those, right? I don't think it's going to be a pattern. I mean, Metcalf's not really efficient, but I don't think 1.5. Yeah, I'm going to go under.
I'm going to go under, and the reason why I say under is open the second half. DK caught that ball, like at the line of scrimmage, and then hurdled 3 people for like 12 more yards. So DK Metcalf, he's going to take care of it. He's going to learn a lesson, and he's going to go 0 drops through the game. Zeb, are we going to see more than 3.5 over/under targets for Mr. Tyler Lockett?
Yeah, he should be back to form this week.
Ross?
Way over.
Way over?
Yep.
I mean, he'll probably have that by halftime.
I'm going to go under, and the reason why I'm going under is that I think they still want to kind of nurse him back into the game. He only had 2 targets in that game, and I think both of them were like in the fourth quarter. They're not going to target him a lot, but they're going to give him a lot more of those kind of routes where they're just going to find and isolate him one-on-one, and Russ is just going to teardrop him in, but he's not going to get more than 3 targets in the game. And final prediction, Zeb, over under 1.5 fumbles lost for the Seahawks.
What's the weather like on Monday?
We're ways away from the weather, but I think it's supposed to be kind of dreary.
If it's all wet and whatnot, I think it's going to be over.
It
Hopefully
looks
we'll
like
get
it's cold, but Sunday's going to rain. I mean, Seattle weather's impossible to predict. Like most cities in the world, you can predict it this far out, but
the current prediction for weather on Monday is
6-7 degrees.
45 degrees Fahrenheit, 20%
Sorry.
chance of precipitation, 7 degrees Celsius for you metrics out there. But it's going to be 45 degrees Monday night.
So mostly dry and not too windy. Yeah, I'll say under.
Okay.
I'm going to go under as well.
I'm going to go under in principle because if they have more than 1 fumble, I might shoot somebody. I'll go buy a gun and I will shoot the first person that I see wearing a Vikings uniform. Because
that's not what the Second Amendment is.
You know what?
Yeah.
No one can stop me. So, again, hyperbole, I'm joking. I don't own a gun, nor would I ever want to buy a gun to shoot someone because someone lost a football. It's a joke. Please don't report me to the FBI. But those are our predictions. Gentlemen, do you have any shout-outs today?
Shout out to Yumi, who bit of an adventure in 2019, but is ending strong, and I'm really, really proud of her. And I'm going to do details on a podcast, but I just want to put it out there. I'm really, really proud of her. She's doing amazing.
Yumi. Zeb, any shout-outs for you?
Yeah, shout out to my buddy Nigel. Check out his new album, Tantrum. Available only on Bandcamp.
Nice. I want to give a shout out to Zeb and Ross. Happy Thanksgiving to both of you guys. I hope you enjoyed celebrating as you will. I want you guys, everyone out there, check out us on hawkscast.com. Check us out on the Twitter at Seahawks Podcast or Seahawks Forum. Got a lot of great topics. Shout out to the Mandalorian because that shit's awesome. And
Mando.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.